Light bled from the vast lattice of the Orion broadcast net, spilling over the colossal Colosseum of the three empires like a crown forged from 1,000 suns. Each tier of the arena's spiraling structure was filled to capacity. The stands a living mosaic of alien life from worlds so far apart their skies had never shared the same constellations. The air vibrated with a cacophony of voices, metallic, resonant, chittering, melodic, woven into a single chorus of expectation. They had gathered for spectacle, for dominance confirmed, for the easy pleasure of seeing the galaxy's newest petitioners humbled before the eyes of trillions. The laughter had begun long before the match itself. When the human delegation had first stepped onto the staging platform, it had rolled through the crowd like a storm, each species adding its own timbre of derision. Transparent betting screens hovered in the air, their odds flashing in garish neon. 10,432 to 1 against Earth's champion. It was less a prediction and more a declaration. This duel was not expected to be a fight, but an execution. Elias Cross stood in the center of that expectation like an immovable stone in a rushing river. His armor lacked the gleam of the competitors who had come before. It was a pragmatic patchwork of matte plates and warm ballistic weave, designed for endurance rather than display. Across his back lay a rifle so antiquated that it might have belonged behind glass in a museum. Bolt action, with stock scarred with deep grooves, steel dulled to a weather gray. There were no embedded targeting systems, no energy capacitors, no AI-assisted optics. The galaxy saw an artifact, a relic clutched by a desperate species clinging to obsolete traditions. The announcer's voice boomed, resonating with artificial harmonics, to carry across the dome and into every broadcast across the stars. Representing the Trinarch empires, Champion VA Corps, the Iron Fawn. The entrance gate hissed open and the ground trembled under the weight of the figure that stepped through. VA Corps was a towering amalgam of flesh and engineered perfection, his musculature overlaid with armor plates traced by glowing energy conduits. His lower jaw jutted forward, bearing 4 metal-encrusted tusks polished like ceremonial blades. A weapon the size of a small cannon rested easily in his clawed hands, its rails humming with restrained power. Each step he took made the reinforced flooring groan in protest. A ripple of reverent noise swept through the audience, rising to a roar. The champion's record was perfect, 29 duels, 29 victories, each an emphatic demonstration of imperial supremacy. His armor was the pinnacle of Trinarch military technology. Thermal cloaking mesh, adaptive plating, kinetic dispersal fields calibrated to neutralize the fastest rail slugs. VA Corps stopped 10 paces from Elias, his head tilting slightly as he studied the rifle. His voice carried without translation, a deep resonance that seemed to crawl into the bones. You bring a relic to face me? This will be mercifully brief. Elias didn't blink. We'll see. Around them, alien commentators began their play-by-play with the unshakable certainty of those who believed they already knew the ending. No energy shielding on the human, one remarked in a clicking tone. The weapon is ballistic, projectiles propelled by combustion. Such methods were abandoned centuries ago. Another voice chimed in, airy and amused. Perhaps they mean to win by confusing the champion with nostalgia. But the stakes were far from ceremonial for the human standing in the arena. By the compact of champions, a treaty older than most of the empires represented here, a civilization denied its petition for recognition could demand a duel between champions. Victory meant their petition must be granted. Defeat meant their bid could not be raised for another century. Humanity had been denied entry into the Galactic Assembly outright, deemed too primitive, too volatile, too human. The duel was their only way in. The containment field above them shimmered as the arena began to shift. Massive alloy panels retracted to reveal the engineered battlefield beneath. 30 square kilometers of jungle rendered with painstaking detail, complete with simulated weather, humidity, and even local fauna designed to mimic the real. Towering trees tangled with vines formed a dense canopy, Jagged ridges carved the landscape into choke points. A sluggish, murky river wound its way through the center like a vein. The two platforms lowered in unison, carrying champion and challenger into opposite edges of the artificial wilderness. From above, the crowd leaned forward, hungry for the first clash. The referee's voice was crisp and final. Begin. VA Core surged forward, moving with surprising speed for his size, his rail rifle sweeping the terrain in slow arcs. His visor scanned across multiple spectrums, picking up heat blooms, electromagnetic signatures, micro-vibrations in the soil. His first strides were confident, unhurried. The gait of a predator, certain his prey had nowhere to run. Elias did not meet him head-on. He stepped backward into the shadowed tree line, letting the dense foliage swallow him whole. The transition was seamless. One moment he was a figure in the open, the next he was an outline blurred into the rhythm of the forest. His movements were measured, his boots falling in silence on the thick loam. He carried himself not like a gladiator seeking glory, but like a hunter already inside the hunt. From 1,000 light years away, Earth's delegation watched through their private feed. No one among them spoke. They knew Elias's record. Urban counter-sniping in war zones where electronic warfare had stripped the battlefield of drones and satellites. Jungle operations in places where even sensors failed under the weight of heat and life. He was chosen because he could vanish in plain sight. In the canopy above, a simulated wind stirred, setting leaves swaying and breaking the perfect stillness. Elias moved deeper, pausing every few steps to listen, not for the champion himself, but for the disturbances he made in the living pattern of the jungle. Somewhere, the hiss of servos accompanied a footfall too heavy to be animal. VA Core was not trying to be quiet. A metallic chime echoed faintly through the tree line. It was not from Elias. It was VA Core broadcasting on the open channel. You may hide a while, human, but in the end, the hunt always ends the same way. Elias said nothing. He eased a rifle from his back, cradling it in practiced hands, the bolt sliding open with a soft click before he fed a single round into the chamber. High above, the crowd's amusement deepened. They saw the human retreating and assumed it was fear. Some began to chant the champion's name. Others made wagers on how many minutes the duel would last. In the undergrowth, Elias scanned through his scope, not to fire, but to learn. VA Core's armor moved with him like a living organism, the plates shifting and overlapping in constant motion. Weaknesses, if any existed, would appear only briefly and only from certain angles. It was a puzzle that would take time to solve. A jagged crack of thunder rolled overhead, followed by the first drops of rain. The artificial storm descended quickly, muting distant sounds and turning the canopy into a living drum. Elias welcomed the weather. Rain would mask his movement and cloud the champion's sensors, forcing him to rely more on his own instincts. The duel was no longer a contest of weapons alone. It was now a contest of patience, discipline, and the ability to read the battlefield not as a machine did, but as a living being. Far above, in the Imperial Gallery, one golden-eyed admiral leaned toward his companion. If the human survives the first 10 minutes, it will be more dangerous than we thought. The noblewoman beside him laughed softly, unconcerned. Then I suppose we have nothing to worry about. Below, in the dripping shadows of the jungle, Elias adjusted his scope, his breath slow and even. He had no intention of rushing the shot. The champion would fall, but only when the galaxy was watching closely enough to remember how it happened. The first drops pattered on the leaves, quickening into a steady curtain that blurred the edges of the jungle. Elias welcomed the sound. Rain was a blanket for the senses, softening footsteps, masking the faint mechanical clink of his rifle's action. He kept moving deeper, his path neither straight nor random, but calculated to avoid giving VA Core a pattern to track. Every 20 paces, he paused, not to rest, but to listen. Somewhere to his left, the undergrowth shivered in a way no wind could cause. A second figure emerged from the green, cloaked in a ghillie suit so perfectly blended with moss and vine it was nearly invisible. The visor was covered in woven foliage, and the face beneath was masked entirely. A quick, silent gesture, 2 fingers to the eyes, then pointing north. Elias returned a single nod. This was Sergeant Mara Vance, his second in the squad, and one of the finest shooters Earth had produced. She slipped past him without a word, vanishing into the misting rain toward her assigned position. Somewhere farther ahead, Corporal Juno Reyes and Specialist Tarek Holt were already threading through the vegetation. 4 humans against 1 champion sounded like imbalance, but the compact allowed it under cultural combat conditions, a loophole the Empires had agreed to because they assumed it would make no difference. The champion's armor, weaponry, and enhancements were considered so superior that an entire human platoon wouldn't matter. The squad knew different. The battlefield favored patience and invisibility, and no culture in the galaxy had perfected those arts in the mud and shadows like humans. Elias crouched near a tangle of roots, drawing a stubby device from his belt. It resembled a chunk of rusted metal to the untrained eye, but when he thumbed the switch, a faint pulse traveled through the ground. Morse code, slow and deliberate, clicking in their bone conduction earpieces, position set. Wait for signal. Above the canopy, the alien's thruster pack hissed, adjusting his stance on a ridge. VA Core's sensors scanned through the rain, locking on a heat blooms and motion vectors, dismissing the flickering ghosts of small fauna. The rail rifle rested in his clawed hands, its coils warming with each half charge. He was hunting, but the forest seemed to ripple with false trails. A patch of warmth here, then gone. A figure's outline there, only to dissolve into branches. The first decoy triggered, a silhouette crafted from thermal cloth and branchwork, faintly heated by a chemical pack. VA Core swung his rifle, fired. The slug cut through the decoy's chest, shredding bark and leaves. No cry of pain followed. He clicked his mandibles in irritation. Through the rain, Elias watched from his prone position in a shallow depression, sight trained not on the champion, but on the champion's habits. VA Core favored the high ground still, even after his first shot betrayed his position. He liked to announce his presence, relying on intimidation as much as raw power. That arrogance was a resource Elias could use. From the south, a faint triple click signaled Juno's position. She was in place on the riverbank, scope aligned with a possible retreat path. Tarek's double-click confirmed his overwatch on the ridge opposite VA Core. Mara's silence was deliberate. She was close enough to hear the champion breathe if he paused. Elias knew the alien's kind had fought wars that lasted centuries, but those wars had been fought with technology that could see through stone and erase armies from orbit. This fight was stripped of all but the most basic tools, and in such simplicity, humanity's old ghosts, its hunters, stalkers, and guerrilla fighters, came alive. VA Core's voice carried again, deep and almost bored. You prolong this for your own fear, human. The compact demands courage. Show yourself. Elias let the rain answer. He adjusted the elevation on his scope, sighting through a gap in the foliage toward the crest where VA Core stood. The range was far for a clean shot, and the champion's armor plates shifted in unpredictable patterns. He needed more than just a clear view. He needed the moment when that armor gave him a line to something vital. Lightning flashed across the dome's artificial sky, bright enough to turn shadows into daylight for a heartbeat. In that instant, Elias saw Mara ghost between trees only meters from VA Core's flank. The alien didn't notice. His sensors had too many competing heat blooms. Mara's rifle was raised, but she didn't fire, discipline over impulse. The plan was clear. One shot, one kill, no room for return fire. The champion moved again, slow and deliberate, as though the outcome was inevitable. His rail rifle swept the tree line, but his posture betrayed complacency. The Empires had never lost a champion's duel in 300 years. No human had ever stood in this arena before. Tarek's voice, low and sharp, came through the coded pulses. 2 seconds. Elias tensed, breathing slow, letting the rain bead on his rifle stock. The second decoy activated. Thermal and motion signatures crafted to look like a sprinting human breaking cover. VA Corps took the bait instantly, swinging his rifle and firing. The slug tore through empty air and shattered a tree. In the same breath, Mara adjusted her position, her scope now locked on a seam near the champion's neck. But Elias caught something. The shift of VA Corps' stance revealed a panel at the side of his armor, just under the rib-like plating. A vent for the Bio Corps' cooling system. It was small, but large enough for a .338 round to pass through if aimed perfectly. He marked the angle in his mind. It wasn't yet right. The rain thickened, drumming on leaves and armor alike. VA Corps descended the ridge, confident the decoy had been the human himself. His voice came again, tinged with mockery. You hide behind tricks, but tricks are the weapon of the desperate. Elias slid backward, careful not to disturb the foliage more than the falling rain already did. He was repositioning for the line he needed. Mara and Juno adjusted with him. The squad's silent coordination born of months of drilling in conditions no alien simulation could match. VA Corps reached the forest floor, scanning again. The jungle felt closer here, the vines thicker, the air hotter. He slowed, for the first time uncertain. Every sound seemed too evenly spread, too deliberately vague. A shadow shifted behind him. Mara again, this time even closer. She froze as his sensors swept past, then moved only when the rain masked her outline. Elias reached the edge of a small clearing, prone in the underbrush. Through his scope, the vent was visible now, framed between two overlapping plates. It was still a low-probability shot, but in combat, low probability was sometimes the only option. He waited, the crosshairs steady, until Vicor turned slightly, speaking aloud to an audience he assumed was still amused. Soon, humans will remember their place. That was the moment the squad had been waiting for. The target's armor gap was fully exposed. Elias's finger brushed the trigger, feeling the rifle's worn surface under his glove. But he didn't fire. Not yet. This was not about proving he could hit. It was about making the galaxy see the shot, understand it, and remember it. He needed VA Corps committed to the wrong threat when it happened. The squad held in absolute stillness, the rain the only movement. Then Elias let his breath out, almost imperceptibly, and waited for the storm to give him the final cover. A gust of wind pushed the rain sideways, turning each drop into a needle that rattled against leaves and armor. Elias welcomed it. The shifting air would bend sound, and for a moment, even advanced alien sensors would struggle to distinguish echoes from truth. Through his scope, VA Corps' vent was still visible, but distance and angle made the shot less than certain. Patience mattered more than opportunity. Mara's silent advance brought her to within 30 meters of the champion, but she didn't fire either. She kept her scope trained on the gap beneath his helmet joint, the place where armor met organic tissue. One wrong twitch could alert him, and that would end this game in seconds. From the ridge, Tard's position gave him the widest view. Through the squad's code pulses, he sent a terse update. Target circling east. Juno responded from her riverbank position with a steady click pattern, ready for crossfire. The trap was set, but only if the champion stepped into it willingly. VA Corps adjusted his stance, scanning. His rail rifle remained ready, but his movements had slowed. No longer the arrogant stride of a predator certain of victory, but the cautious tread of one unsure where the danger lay. Elias recognized the change in posture. He'd seen on human battlefields the moment when confidence bled into unease. It was a fracture line that could be widened with the right pressure. The forest conspired in their favor. The storm's crescendo deepened, thunder rolling through the dome in long, trembling waves. Lightning forked in the artificial sky, each flash turning the world into a tableau of stark silhouettes and gleaming water. For the briefest moment, VA Corps' faceplate reflected white light, and Elias saw the faint narrowing of his eyes. The second decoy went live on Juno's side of the field, an infrared phantom, accompanied by the sound of movement generated from a small speaker hidden under leaves. VA Corps turned instantly, armor servos hissing as he brought the rail rifle to bear. He fired without hesitation. the slug detonating in a plume of earth and steam. The false target dissolved into shredded vegetation. That was when Mara shifted, her barrel aligned with his exposed neck seam. Her finger tightened, but Elias pulsed a sharp hold through the calm. The champion had reacted too quickly. His armor plates were still in defensive rotation. The shot would strike metal, not flesh. Elias moved forward through the underbrush, closing the gap by 20 meters. His rifle was steady, his breathing low and controlled. Every movement was deliberate, each placement of a knee or boot chosen to merge with the rhythm of the rain. Tarek released his own distraction, a soft whistle of sound from a compact sonic emitter. VA core froze, head snapping toward it, sensors recalibrating. His movements betrayed the faintest irritation, his mandibles flexing in what might have been a growl. He was beginning to realize this was not a hunt. It was a trial of endurance, one in which his superior tech was becoming less relevant by the minute. Elias finally had the shot. The vent glowed faintly, tiny plumes of steam escaping into the rain. Crosshairs aligned, finger brushing the trigger. Yet instinct told him the timing was still wrong. He needed the entire galaxy watching at the instant the shot fell, their laughter dying in their throats. Mara's position tightened the noose. Juno adjusted for angle, and Tarek kept his decoys active, forcing VA Core to pivot back and forth, a predator turning in circles. A sudden crash came from the far left, branches snapping, foliage tearing. VA Core lunged toward it, believing the noise to be his prey, finally breaking cover. In truth, it was Mara's planted lure, a suspended log cut halfway through and rigged to fall when a vine was tugged from distance. The alien sensors flared with false positives, distracting him long enough for Elias to move into his final firing position. The jungle here opened slightly, giving him a clean lane. VA Core's side was exposed, the vent broad and unguarded. The alien paused in the open, scanning, his body language torn between pursuit and uncertainty. Elias could almost feel the heartbeat of the crowd beyond the dome, the way their excitement had shifted to an unfamiliar tension. He exhaled. The world contracted to the narrow, black ring of his scope. The trigger's pull was smooth, deliberate. The rifle bucked against his shoulder with a familiar, reassuring kick. The sound, a muted, almost polite crack, was swallowed by the rain. In the same instant, VA Core stiffened. The round punched through the vent, shattering the fragile conduits inside the biocore. Blue-white light flared under his armor as energy bled uncontrolled into the surrounding systems. His rail rifle clattered to the wet earth, claws spasming as the shock tore through his frame. For a heartbeat, the jungle was utterly still. The storm's noise receded in Elias's awareness, replaced by the sound of the champion's labored breathing. VA Core staggered, one knee sinking into the mud. His head turned slowly toward where the shot had come from, but there was no target to see, only the dripping leaves and shifting shadows. Mara lowered her rifle. Tarek's last decoy fell silent. Juno's scope followed the alien's collapse from across the river. None of them moved to finish it. The shot had already done its work. VA Core tried to rise. His armor plates shuddered, systems failing in sequence, lights dimming. The vent glowed brighter for a moment, then flickered out. His mandibles clicked once, a sound that might have been defiance or simple disbelief. Then he toppled forward into the mud, the weight of his body sending a dull thud through the soaked ground. Elias didn't smile. There was no triumph in his expression, only a steady calm as he worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing into the wet earth. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and stepped back into the deeper shadow of the trees. Above the battlefield, the containment dome amplified the crowd's reaction. For the first few seconds, there was nothing. No cheer, no roar, only the silence of millions trying to comprehend what they'd just seen. Then came the uproar, a confused storm of voices in 100 tongues, disbelief mingling with outrage. The alien commentators were tripping over each other, replaying the impact frame by frame. They zoomed in on the rifle, the arcane action of the bolt, the impossibly small gap Elias had struck. There must be a malfunction, one insisted. Or sabotage, another guessed. Yet the slow-motion footage told its own story. One bullet, one gap, one perfect shot. In the Imperial Gallery, some nobles leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Others whispered quickly to aides, issuing orders that would ripple through military channels before the hour was out. The possibility that humans could breach their finest armor with nothing more than chemical propellants was not one they could ignore. Elias and his squad didn't wait for the official declaration. They began to withdraw through the jungle, vanishing back into the green the same way they had come, silent, deliberate, unhurried. The duel was over. As the rain eased, a final roll of thunder passed over the dome. The battlefield's artificial sun began to pierce the thinning clouds, casting long shadows across the fallen champion. Somewhere far above, in the control towers, the officiators would soon be forced to admit what had happened. The undefeated line of the Empire's champions had been broken by a single human shot. Elias never looked back. He didn't need to. The sound of the crowd told him enough, and the weight of the rifle on his back felt the same as it always had. Earned, not inherited. The storm had ended, but in the hearts of those watching, something far more enduring had begun. The arena floor lay still except for the slow spread of rainwater into the cratered mud, where Viacor had fallen. His armor, once radiant with the pulse of a living weapon, now sagged over lifeless form. Steam rose faintly from the ruined vent, a ghostly reminder of the shot that had silenced the champion. Above, the containment dome's simulated sky began to clear, its storm dissipating under program control. Sunlight slanted through, catching on the alien's metal tusks and the splintered leaves that surrounded him. For a time, the Colosseum remained gripped in an unnatural quiet. Millions across the galaxy were connected to this moment. Viewers who had tuned in to enjoy a spectacle, who had expected the human to be flattened within minutes. The stillness was not reverence. It was disbelief stretched thin. The image of the champion lying face down in the mud refused to fit into their understanding of how such contests worked. A single commentator's voice cut through the silence, trembling with something between shock and awe. The shot was clean, deliberate, without hesitation. Another chimed in, this one sharper, defensive. Impossible. No primitive kinetic weapon should breach Imperial composite plating. There must be a flaw in the armor, or the first voice overrode it, replaying the kill in slow motion. The frame froze on the instant of impact, the bullet a sliver of death threading the seam. It was too perfect to dismiss as luck. In the Imperial viewing gallery, dignitaries shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered to aides with urgent hands, already transmitting encrypted orders. Others leaned forward, eyes locked on the human who had not yet emerged from the jungle. What worried them was not just the precision of the shot, but the discipline, the way the squad had controlled the pace of the duel until the exact moment to strike. It was a style of warfare that no simulation, no algorithm, could replicate. Elias appeared at the edge of the tree-line, rifle slung across his back, helmet visor still down. Mara stepped out beside him, followed by Juno and Tarek. They moved in an unbroken line, unhurried, their posture carrying neither boast nor apology. As they crossed the open ground, the officiators descended in a grav car, its silver hull reflecting the brightening sky. An alien official emerged, draped in ceremonial fabric that shifted colors with each breath. By the compact, they announced in a voice that carried through the dome, the champion of the Trinarch empires has fallen. The challenge is resolved. Humanity earns its petition for full recognition among the assembly worlds. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in layered sound. Roars of outrage from those who had bet against the humans, murmurs of fascination from those already recalculating the balance of power. Some alien factions shouted for a rematch, others for an investigation. But none could undo what had been witnessed. Elias stopped before the official, saying nothing. Words weren't needed. The shot had already spoken. The official inclined their head, perhaps in respect, perhaps in caution, then gestured toward the tunnel leading out of the arena. The squad walked off the field in the same silence with which they had entered. Behind them, medtech drones swarmed Viecor's body, scanning for any anomaly that might explain the defeat. No explanation would change the fact. The undefeated streak was broken. In the corridors beneath the Colosseum, the noise of the crowd became a muffled backdrop. The air here smelled of metal, ozone, and wet earth. Elias removed his helmet, shaking the damp from his hair. Mara was the first to speak, her tone flat but edged with satisfaction. "We'll be on every security report in the galaxy by morning." "Good," Juno replied. "Means they'll think twice before underestimating us again." Tarek chuckled quietly, leaning his rifle against the wall. "Or they'll send something worse next time." Elias set his rifle down on the bench, running a cloth over the wormwood. "They can send whatever they want," he said. "It won't change the rules of the hunt." His voice was steady, carrying none of the adrenaline still simmering in his blood. He cleaned each groove of the stock with care, like a craftsman tending a tool that had served well. Beyond the tunnel, the alien networks were already ablaze. Footage of the duel was being replayed in slow-motion loops, dissected by military analysts, conspiracy theorists, and political commentators. Some called the shot luck. Others called it genius. The truth was simpler. It was training, patience, and an understanding that even the most advanced armor had to breathe somewhere. In the chamber where the assembly would later convene, the ripple effect was already forming. Worlds that had never considered humanity a threat began reevaluating their military doctrines. Generals ordered tests on low-tech weapons, realizing their defenses had been built against predictable, high-energy attacks. Trade ministers debated the consequences of giving humans unrestricted access to the galaxy's markets. Intelligence agencies began compiling every piece of data they could find on Elias Cross and his squad. For the humans themselves, the victory was not a declaration of superiority, but of belonging. They had not entered the arena to prove they could conquer the galaxy, only to prove they could not be dismissed. That night, far from the Colosseum's towering walls, the squad camped in a quiet grove within the diplomatic sector's restricted grounds. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air cool and heavy with the scent of wet stone and alien blossoms. A small fire crackled in a ring of scavenged stones, its warmth a comfort against the chill. Elias sat with the rifle across his lap, the cloth still in his hand. He worked methodically, oiling the moving parts, checking the scope's alignment, polishing the stock until the wood gleamed faintly in the firelight. The others talked in low voices, trading half-jokes and quiet recollections of the match, but he let their words drift past. When the rifle was clean, he set it beside him and leaned back against a log. "It's not the gun," he said finally, his eyes on the fire. "It's the one behind it." The words hung in the air, simple yet unshakable. Mara gave a small nod. Tarek smirked faintly, and Juno's eyes reflected the flames, unreadable. None of them argued. They had all lived the truth of it. Above them, the stars of the diplomatic sector's artificial sky turned slowly, a precise imitation of a night over Earth's deserts. Somewhere out there, beyond the bright points, the news of what had happened today was already spreading from world to world. Some would call it a fluke, others a warning. A few might even call it the start of something larger. Elias didn't care what they called it. The galaxy had laughed at the rusted rifle, and now it would remember it. And if the day came when they had to step into another arena, on any world against any opponent, he knew they would carry more than just a weapon. They would carry the weight of the moment when laughter turned to silence. The fire burned low, casting long shadows that merged with the dark beyond the grove. The squad rested in the quiet, each lost in thought, the sound of distant traffic a faint reminder of the civilization they had just forced to make room for them. Somewhere, in a vault beneath the Colosseum, the casing from Elias's shot sat sealed in an evidence container. It would be studied, measured, perhaps even feared. But no analysis would ever fully explain how a single bullet had ended centuries of dominance. In the stillness, Elias closed his eyes, the memory of the shot as vivid as the moment it had left the barrel. A clean break. No second attempt. Just the line between before and after. Tomorrow would bring diplomacy, negotiations, and the shifting tides of politics. Tonight, there was only the fire, the rifle, and the knowledge that in the eyes of the galaxy, humanity had arrived.